right, so I just got done reading Tails Gets Trolled, or TGT, Chapter 1 by Laserbot. At the time of recording this, I will have just finished a bachelor's degree in English literature, and what better use of my education than, a fair review or analysis, perhaps with elements of cultural critique and the sorts of Laserbot's long-running web comic. I don't know if you, I think this kind of good steps beyond, not to get ahead of myself, but steps beyond what one might call fan fiction, and rather perhaps folk art or vernacular creativity of sorts. For those that don't know, Tails Gets Trolled is likely most famous for its very first page, which an image of Sonic the Hedgehog's pal, Miles Tails Prower, as drawn by Laserbot, is his silly reaction image of it. You've seen it before, certainly, if you've spent any time in online spaces. Now, what interests me about art like Tails Gets Trolled is how far removed it is from the kind of institutional slop that we so often consume and feed ourselves with, and how it's the in many ways the essence of kind of free creativity, despite the fact that it relies on known properties and such. And in fact, you could argue there is sort of an inherent kind of anarchist or rebellious spirit by flagrantly flagrantly violating copyright law. So at its core, Tails Gets Trolled. It's the product of its time, at least at the beginning. I've only read the first chapter, which from what I hear is one of the shortest, but also gives me time then to do a bit of kind of a theoretical exposition. Now, Tails Gets Trolled at its core is a kind of seems to be the silly-ish product of a moment of inspiration. From what I've read, Laserbot had a friend on DeviantArt. I think this was originally published on there. For those not in the know, DeviantArt is a place where a lot of kind of anime adjacent and sort of Tumblrian art, was prominent. I think it's not quite as popular as it used to be now that we've kind of homogenized the internet into 3 or 4 spaces, meta platforms, Twitter, so on and so forth. But a friend was getting trolled, and Laserbot stepped in to help, and a lot of things, that kind of what I call like a jerk store moment sort of came of the ways in which you could deal with the trolls. How do you deal with the trolls? The jerk store being a reference to Seinfeld. Just look it up. But yeah. So Tails Gets Trolled. What happens is a group of trolls, not quite personified as actual trolls, like one might see in a doll store, but he's upset. His feelings are hurt. They call him lots of homophobic ethnic slurs. No, there's no ethnic slurs, just homophobic slurs. I want to say epitaphs. That's the word, epitaph. So did you say that? Epitaphs? Whatever. You know what I'm talking about. The F slur. He calls Tails is called the F slur, and the R slur. So goes to Sonic, and Sonic kind of takes a liberal pacifist approach. And I mean the term liberal as opposed to leftist in regards to the trolls. Kind of flagrant 4chan-ish insults. And I couldn't help immediately just noticing how the choice of dialogue here is, I wouldn't say so much as it's childish as it is kind of very much adherent to a certain masculine way of bullying and talking, of kind of the 80s all the way up till sort of the American Pie era of the high school bullies in like teen sex comedies and such. But it takes it up a notch, closer to kind of the conversational style of someplace like 4chan's V. Anyway, Sonic takes the liberal pacifist approach, and that nobody's interested in that. Shadow is nearby. As far as I can tell, Laserbot thinks Shadow's a lot cooler than Sonic, which circa, I should look at when this was published originally. I think it's 2011. I'll know quickly here. If you'll bear with me. I'll lose my train of thought here. Yeah, 2011. Okay. Yeah. A lot of this is very of its time. It's definitely somebody who cut their teeth on Newgrounds, 4chan, Linkin Park. What was it I wrote down? Thrice. I have a feeling that Laserbot likes Thrice and thinks something like Panic at the Disco is gay, that kind of thing. Using the not my words, but the words of that clearly Laserbot is at least comfortable or is exploring. That's kind of what I would call like bromophobic kind of comedy. But yeah, clearly there's a Shadow is seemingly probably the most cool character that we've seen so far. And what I really appreciated about this out the gate is that rather than sort of trying to channel what Laserbot understands about these characters, he's used their image and their likeness to kind of formulate his own characterizations that do suit the way that these characters look, but they aren't adherent to the lore established by, say, Sega or by Nintendo, as we see later on with Mario. But there are nuggets there of kind of implied previous lore that certainly is meta-conscious of the source material. For example, Shadow chastises Sonic for not being violent. Shadow is the one to take a violent approach. Shadow is more kind of in the Malcolm Xian sense, by any means necessary, kind of leftist liberal. I would be hard pressed to call Shadow like a Marxist or something, but definitely more of an anarchist or just kind of a misanthrope. But yeah, it gives Shadow a hard time for not killing Eggman ever, and it's kind of a running bit in franchise media that the villain never gets killed. And since Sonic is the hero of Sonic's story, it's a bit of a shame. And this isn't the time where people are still laughing at Shadow for toting a gun in his eponymous game, Shadow the Hedgehog, and kind of playing with these ideas that Shadow's so hard and Sonic's such a pussy, But not much story has moved on so far, but we understand that there is this thing to be uncovered. These trolls are entirely made up of the original content of OC, whereas the rest of the world is seemingly made up of known IP. At the end of the chapter, we get to meet Silver the Hedgehog, which is an OC. For those that know, Silver the Hedgehog features prominently in Sonic 06. As he does, and I think Sonic Rivals, but we haven't seen that much of Silver since then, although he's appeared here and there. What are some other things I noticed? Mario shows up, and Mario, I think that Laserbot sees the humor and kind of the ridiculousness of Sonic, and this was in the time when people were really kind of hard on Sonic. We're still only 5 years out of Sonic 06. We've seen Sonic the Hedgehog 4 come and go. Sonic the Hedgehog 4 is not a particularly great game. The franchise is kind of a joke, and the Sonic and Friends kind of bit that people like to say, where they make fun of how many side characters keep getting introduced and just how kind of ridiculous that universe has become. Whereas Mario's kind of stayed steadfast in quality. Circa 2011, we have we're kind of in the Mario Galaxy territory. We're still having some great mainline games, the new Super Mario Brothers, so on and so forth. So I can imagine that Laserbot at the time of writing this was a bit more partial towards Mario, who's off on his own side quest during this, sticking up for Toad, who's also been trolled. And the chapter reveals to us at the end that Mario has a violent tendency. I should say that this comic is quite ultra-violent as much as it is crass, closer to Shadow's. What were some other things? There's a reference to weed that makes me wonder if Laserbot has ever partaken. I would argue he's been around people that have partaken, but likely himself has not. It's just the vibe I get. And there's a good Joe, which is one of the trolls. It's seemingly the head troll at this point in time. He's taking notice of Shadow. He's not happy with him. After Shadow has killed a bunch of trolls in defense of Tails. It's a good thing to do as a friend, I suppose. Maybe a little bit of an overreaction. But Shadow denies the allegations that he killed the trolls, and he says, "I saw you high as shit with the shovel." So that explains it, because Knuckles, I haven't mentioned yet, the Shadow discuss the prospect of getting high together. So I suppose they got high. I guess it doesn't say what drug it was, but the tone suggests marijuana. They get high together before they shovel up and put away dead bodies. I guess that's something you do. Also, another plot thread we haven't quite pulled on yet is Knuckles and Rouge the Bat are a couple, and it's somewhat canon. But after Knuckles gets high with Shadow, he wakes up and discovers that Donkey Kong is in bed with him, and Donkey Kong in the morning simply just says banana, and I thought that was pretty funny too. Yeah, there's a lot of misspellings in this. I don't think those types of analyses that I've seen here on the web. We'll talk more about some of those as I get deeper into it, and then I feel comfortable kind of getting deeper into other people's thoughts in the series and kind of using those as jumping off boards for my own opinions and thoughts. But from what I understand, this is one of those cult objects that people kind of so bad it's goodify. I find that very shallow. Let's take this at face value. Clearly, there's a large story to tell. What drew me to read this today. I have read, I think, the first 9 chapters before, but it was long enough ago that I don't really remember what happened. But I remember being relatively engrossed and then kind of tried to pick it back up and had a hard time following what was going on. But when somebody said that this is Berserk for autistic people or something like that, again, not my words, it's what I read. Berserk, which I recently read, the popular long-running manga series by the late, just can't remember the author's name here, the mangaka's name off the top of my head. By the late Miura, the late Miura, which is, it's a stellar, borderline, Homerian epic of revenge. And it's just very bleak and I wouldn't say beautiful, but moving and engaging. And Guts is a very strong kind of anti-hero, and I think Shadow perhaps is being set up to be this very interesting and dynamic kind of anti-hero figure who's motivated by very toxic emotions, but still errs on the side of kind of a quote unquote like cosmic good. So we've actually laid the foundations here at the gate of Tails Gets Trolled for something that definitely steps beyond the scope of your sort of typical AO3 gag and into something much more potent. It's loaded with various themes of toxic masculinity, not to use the buzzword, but it's true, of kind of, I think, just essential tenets of liberal and conservative and left and right ways of dealing with kind of conflict by taking this intimate conflict and taking it to such a hyper ultra violent extreme. It's a way of exploring manners in which we can effectively deal with conflict. Certainly relevant at basically all times in history. So that's those are my thoughts on Tails Gets Trolled, Chapter 1. I also should say, actually, I have one more thing I wanted to say. Just in the time that this came out, 2011, a few years after the release of Smash Brothers Brawl, but this got me thinking about, I think Nintendo a few days ago announced this app called Nintendo Today, which is a way in which they're going to start sharing their news through an app, where it's kind of a first-hand way of getting information from Nintendo once a day in anticipation for the Nintendo Switch 2 coming out soon. That reminded me of when Super Smash Bros. Brawl was being announced. Every day you check the website. I'd wake up every day before school and check it out. And, you'd be most excited when they'd announce a character that was going to be in the game, but you get stages, they would announce, I think, trophies that would be in the game and various details and such. And it's very exciting that way of releasing information. And we were kind of at the peak of the idea of the crossover being the most appealing thing. But now that we've been playing with multiverses in cinema, and Smash Brothers Ultimate has kind of reached the kind of crux of the novelty of crossover. It's not quite as exciting as it once was, but this is still in the kind of heyday of that being such a powerful, interesting, frankly, consumerist-oriented novelty that's taking it someplace far more original, far more thematically resonant. And for that, Tales Gets Trolled Chapter 1 begets my interest in Chapter 2. Thanks for watching.